God puts us in nations, in places, not by mistake, but to do a job. What if we opened our eyes to the needs of our colleagues, of our leaders, of our subordinates, and we were a priest on their behalf? Welcome to the Repurposing Business Podcast. My name is Brett Johnson.
And I'm Lynn Johnson.
And we're going to be talking about how to get our business into God's business. Our subtext is Let My Business Go, and we'll have guests from around the world. So thank you for joining us this week and every week on the Repurposing Business Podcast. Well, welcome to the Repurposing Business Podcast. My name is Brett Johnson, and my special guest today is Grant Baker, and I'm so grateful to have you here. Grant, awesome to have you. Where are you right now?
I'm in Cape Town, South Africa.
Fantastic.
Southern Cape Town, I'm living in Melkbos, which is a little seaside village in Cape Town. I'm a surfer as well, so I really enjoy living here.
Fantastic. Great. And I met Grant some years ago. Grant's got a fascinating story, and Grant and I got together. We had a cup of coffee, and I remember Grant's famous quote. He said to me, okay, Brett, I've been thinking about this God and business stuff and everything, and we'll get into Grant's background, but he said, okay, I'm prepared to give it, 20 hours, I think is what you said to because I'm a busy guy. That's it. But anyway, so we've far exceeded your 20-hour budget so far.
Yeah, by a long way. You basically didn't tell me the truth. You allowed me to live with a good measure of deception.
Well, there we go. Blessed are the deluded.
Yeah. Are you going to cut this part? Or are you going to include it in the?
No, we're going to include that. Fantastic. So Grant came through one of our executive intensives in Cape Town. It was in the winelands. It was great. We spent a full week, like 12-hour days and that was a long time. And since then, Grant's actually been one of those people who takes the repurposing business manual and goes back and works through it and considers it. And I remember one day visiting you in your business, and you were sitting there and you were thinking through, okay, how does this principle apply to this process in the business, which is fantastic. But Grant, let's back up from there. So you grew up in the Eastern Cape in South Africa, sort of up the Eastern Seaboard, and you became a believer. How old were you? About 20 or so?
I was 17.
Okay. Yeah. And a pretty serious relationship with God from then, right?
Yeah, I was a good agnostic. I believed in the existence of God, didn't acknowledge him at all. And my grandmother's death somehow awakened me, and I became more aware of who God is, and got converted at 17.
Fantastic. Great. Then at some point, you kind of felt like a calling to do sort of the full-time ministry thing, and had quite a wiring as an evangelist. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, so I converted at 17, and actually I was converted in my school hall. So a visiting evangelist he was Trevor Goddard, an ex-South African cricket captain. And he came for about, I think it was 4 days, and preached the gospel. And I made a deal with God, actually. I just preached about this a few days ago. I actually made a deal with the Lord. And part of the deal was that he would need to do some things, and I would actually follow Christ. And the Lord came through very strongly on his deal, and I was... I responded. I didn't think the Lord would come through on his deal, but and out of that, I just wanted to reach young people for Christ, and spent 10 years going from school to school preaching the gospel.
Fantastic. So ever the entrepreneur. So you made a deal with God. He came through, and then you were all in. You followed through on your commitment. And that's quite something. And how did your family take it when you decided, okay, now you're going to be all in on this Jesus thing?
My mom said to me that she was very upset. She's a lovely girl. I think because she was very bright, intellectually orientated, didn't study. And I just actually enrolled at UPE when I got the call of God to go into the schools. So we really paid a deposit. And when I told my parents, I'm really sensing that I want to give my life to preaching the gospel. My mom just burst into tears. She didn't speak to me for a while after that. And then they said to me, it's now the 3rd or 4th of the month, I think it was. I can't remember what month it was. They said, by the end of the month, we would like you to leave home. And you need to, if this is what you want to do with your life, we want you to look after yourself. So I had 20-something days to make a plan. And I left home and found myself in a little room at the back of some Methodist manse, and started preaching the gospel and reaching out to young people. It was a great time. I really enjoyed it.
Wow. So were you a part of an organization that, like the same thing Trevor Goddard had done? Because in South Africa at that time, just to clarify, the government schools allowed people to come in and share the gospel, right?
Yeah, they did. No, I wasn't part of anything. I actually even wasn't part of a church. So I just met up with some guys who were part of the Methodist Church, and they were looking for a youth pastor that was part of the provision of the Lord. And I said, well, I'm very happy to lead the youth and reach out to the schools. And they were quite happy to give me a very small salary and a place to live.
Fantastic. So then you were off to the races. So 10 years you spent clear calling on your life, an evangelist, doing that kind of work. So how did you end up in Cape Town? Because you moved somehow from the Eastern Cape Town to Cape Town in the Western Cape.
Yeah, cut a long story short. So I, during my 10 years, I wanted to study as well. And so then I moved to PE and Port Elizabeth and continued to do outreaches in schools there. And then did some studies with Christian International. I think there's a name for the course I did. It wasn't really good, but it was a great time of me actually learning about church and learning about, I think my evangelism days were great, but I didn't have very good fellowship. I didn't really have a lot of just normal people that I was living out my faith with. So it was a shift to join a community of people and be part of them. And I actually started, I haven't told you this, but I started 2 little businesses during that time.
Oh, yeah?
So I asked my dad for money, and he said, no, I'm not giving you money. But what I can do is I'll buy you a chainsaw and you can use on my trucks. So he came up with the idea that I should earn my own money. This is now 21, 22. And that was such good training for me. So he bought me a chainsaw, and I had to go and cut wood and sell it. And that is the first.
You found wood, you cut it, sold it house to house, or at the side of the road, or what?
I sold it house to house. I made a killing during holiday times. I would take truckloads of wood to Jeffreys Bay and Cape St. Francis, and do little stores along the roads, and then go from house to house. That is great times as well. And then I started what we called Sholen Blocks, which was a little building business. Started that up. So that kept me going. It was probably one of the most. I always refer to it as my dad. It was such a wise decision of my dad not to give me money, but to actually teach me how to fish. It was very much my training ground was that. Learning how to cut wood, learning how to pack it, work with teams, sell it, and then make sure a little bit of a profit at the end. So it was
fantastic, great. And so, were you leading a church eventually up in the Eastern Cape or not?
So I didn't finish So I didn't answer your question. I became part of that church, and eventually I became a youth pastor there with my outreaches, and then became an associate pastor. And then they were happy to say, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I just have a desire to go to Cape Town and plant a church." And so came to Cape Town. We didn't know anyone. There were actually 2 families we did know. We contacted the 2 families. They said it's great, but we're quite happy where we are. So we came to Cape Town not knowing anybody, and we started to reach out to people in restaurants and gyms and on the beaches, different places. And that was good. I found church planting to be, actually it was a lot of the guys that I led to Christ in schools joined us.
Okay.
So a lot of the guys that I actually led to Christ in schools heard about the church plant, joined us, and we had a good couple of years, but I became tired. I think I played out of position, to be honest with you. As the church grew, I became more and more tired. And my marriage took strain as well.
you're wired a bit as an evangelist, but now you're having to do pastoral, admin, wiping noses, all this kind of stuff wasn't your thing.
Yeah, and also it was quite administratively intensive.
Mm.
So I would say my administrative gift was much more task oriented, and probably the depth of leadership and my ability to manage, levels of teams wasn't as strong as it maybe is now.
Yeah.
So I struggled in many ways. A lot of the responsibility came my way, and then I started a business, and I found the business had a lot more favor on it than the church did.
Okay, so tell us about that business.
Well, it's a car rental business. I had a German neighbor that visited me one day, and he asked me, that blue Golf standing there, would you be open to me using the car, and I'd give you some money for it? And I said, yeah, that's great. We're not using it. You can give me some money for it. And then the moment came when he came back about a month later and said to me, Grant, that cheapie, could I take it again? And when he said that, and he said cheapie, I thought, my goodness, this is very, very interesting. And I honestly did, in that moment, I actually thought, this is a business. Yeah. I thought this is an opportunity. And after we made the deal, I phoned a friend of mine who was a guest house owner, also a German guy, and said his name was Chris. I said, Chris, I've just had one of my German windsurfer neighbors, hire my car, and I know you've got a lot of clients there. Can we talk? And from there, Chris sent a lot of his clients my way, and we started a business. Called it RentaCheapie after the Germans' request for a cheapie. So we became very, I think the success was because the German tourists loved us, and especially the windsurfing tourists.
Yeah.
So that's how the business started, and we've had those first few years were such a joyride.
Yeah. Yeah. And how long ago was that?
15 years ago.
Wow. Wow. And RentaCheapie, I mean, you see them all over Cape Town, the little stickers all over the place, and some of them don't look so cheap anymore, but still but you see them all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've rented from you, and it's been a delight. So now you're running a business, right? Yeah. And when I met you, you'd kind of come to terms with the fact that you weren't leading a church anymore. And how were you feeling inside about that? And what was that transition? I remember a guy years ago came to me. He was a Presbyterian preacher who had been to like the top Bible schools and all this stuff. And he came to me and he said, Brett, I want to book an appointment with you. I want to know. So in our book, 45 minutes, he comes to me, he says, how did you feel when you left the ministry? And I said to him, I didn't. End of conversation. But clearly he was thinking about leaving the church and going into business. And he was thinking about the transition. So you kind of went into RentaCheapie almost by accident in a way. So what was going on, and how did this all tie in with the prior 10 years or so?
Well, I think it, often transitions aren't recognizable at first, and the impact of your shift and transition isn't immediate. But as the business grew, and as I realized that God's actually in this business, that was my greatest confusion. I thought business was really just a support means. Yeah. And at best, you're a giver, and then you do the real ministry with your spare time. So that is probably my mindset at that stage of just my journey. I hadn't heard many people speak about business and work and how that is contextualized in our walk with God. So when I saw the favor of the Lord on the business, I began to ask questions. But I think part of my journey of convergence, or probably some healing as well, but just being rooted in my core as a person, and not separating my life out into different compartments, but actually seeing the God of my life and following Him. One of the shifts and healings was realizing that God's been involved in all of this, and some of the guilt and some of the losses that I've been carrying, I actually was able to release them. So I did have a measure of guilt and a measure of sense of failure of call, a failure of birthing what God had called me to. And I think in many ways wrongly perceiving that,
Yeah.
to realizing that actually my road into business is actually the will of God for me.
Mm.
And out of that, working out the call of God, and even seeing my gifts and seeing the gift of evangelism working through business and other gifts that I've got. So, I mean, I think in a few minutes it's very hard to communicate to people listening to this, but it can be I think it's one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but when I left Hout Bay in South Africa, and got sent overseas by Price Waterhouse, and but I had been leading a church in Hout Bay, and I kind of had at the back of my mind, God needed to move me out of the way so that He could build the church. There's this kind of, and I had this phrase I'd heard many years before, that God buries His prophets and finishes His work, and it's kind of like, okay, Brett, we're done with you. And not only are we done with you, but I need to kind of get you out of the way so that I can take this thing to the next level. Yeah. And there can be kind of a bit of a feeling of being set aside and wondering, well, what's going on over here? There's a bit of loss. I remember going through a process of mourning, of kind of separated from your sheep, as it were, and there's kind of a period of mourning. Yeah. But I like your point about a bigger identity. Just it's when you realize, look, God is actually in this thing. So I have to. Therefore, I have to come to terms with it. And I see quite a few business guys who kind of feel guilty about the fact that they enjoy doing business, right? Yeah, I like this stuff, but I should be more excited about church, or more excited about evangelism, or more excited about the Word of God. But I actually like this business stuff. Yeah. So you sorted that one out.
Yeah. And I think it sounds easy just to say it, but to actually walk that out and to have a holistic faith and to have a obedience to God, which is not about balance, not balancing our church or business, but actually just having a mindset of obeying God. Yeah. So for me, there's no difference in I don't even like to speak about this because it's not accurate, but the way I lead in my business would be the way I lead in church.
Yeah, yeah.
And also with my family.
Yeah.
They're all integrated.
Yeah.
I listen to God for the business. I'm asking Him, what does He think? What instructions would you like me to carry out? How do you feel about this person?
Yeah.
So and I think when you've been doing it for a while, it becomes quite normal. But I don't think it's normal for the average Christian.
It's interesting you say that. I was chatting to a guy from Johannesburg, and he went through, I don't know if Piet was in your same executive intensive. He was an accountant from up in the Johannesburg area, an auditor. And looking back at, a few years later, with integration, they actually have much more margin. Because the family, the work, the business, the spiritual life is more integrated. So you're not managing the buckets, and it actually becomes natural, and then you have more time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's less stress. Like I would say I'm a lot more in my skin, present, enjoying. Like even this when we've been through a proper crisis in terms of business, tourists being shut down. So as a car rental business, it's been a real crisis. We've lost. I haven't got accurate figures, but we've lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
But my point is that when you're aware of God building something and doing something, it's just got you've just got it's not your resilience. You've just got there's a strength. Knowing that, and I say it carefully, knowing that God's helped us build this house. It's His house. So even as a business, we've obviously had huge cuts and we've had massive downgrades in turnover. But we are fresh. We've transitioned. We're learning things. It's actually been a great journey.
So talk to us a bit more about that, because clearly car rental business, tourism shut down into South Africa, all the overseas flights shut down and so on, and that was your bread and butter. And how have you kept yourself encouraged, and how have you kept your staff encouraged through this pandemic?
Difficult question. I think in the early stages, we were anticipating just a speed bump. So we were saying we're going to navigate the 3 weeks, and we had our plans in place. When Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, announced another 2 weeks lockdown, then we thought, okay, this is serious. And we realized then that the economic impact on the country would be a long term, and on us. So I think emotionally to face the facts took us a while. And then to own what is really happening and set a new course, and then look at creative ways of how we could generate income, keep what we did have. The most difficult part was retrenchments. We had to retrench people. I think it's very easy to do the maths, so we could do the maths, but then to actually look at people in their eyes and tell them what's going on. We had to feel the pain of that. We had to be realistic and real. And we sort of, I think what kept us sane was we saw ourselves in a war, and there are casualties in war. And it's not the lucky ones that live, but we recognize the sacrifice of those that went before us. Yeah. So we sort of had that perspective of, people have sacrificed to keep us afloat. And so our team was reduced to about 40%. So we had one time we had over 50 staff. Yeah. And we've reduced right down to just slightly more than half of that now. Wow. But it's strengthened us. I think we're grateful. But what we've done is we've looked at the South African market with new eyes. We radically looked at our marketing. We did a 360-degree turn on our marketing. And then we also opened something else up, which has been, we've been pregnant with this business, with this idea for a while, but we fast-tracked it, was the rent-to-deal, which is really a long-term rental option with an option to buy. So it's suited for people that are not credit-worthy. Okay. And so we swung the business quite hard that way the last 2 months. Yeah. And we also found that because we run a business with cheaper vehicles, our pricing for the lower cars has increased quite a bit. So there's a lot more demand to buy cheaper vehicles. Okay. So we're actually selling cars at almost the same price we bought them 5 years ago. Wow. So there's been some things we've been able to leverage our cash flow. So instead of using banks' money, we've sold some assets off. We've done some retrenchments, but done that very carefully, and then swung the business hard in terms of a new market. So it has been a roller coaster ride, and I don't want to talk about it too much, but I think the impact on our country has probably been more hard for me to process. Okay. So looking at the future, looking at our government and how they are, what's the narrative coming from the government, and I'm not really very strongly political, but I am concerned that the trajectory of the country has been seriously shifted. I'm not even sure if my grandkids will actually be able to grow up in South Africa. So just from many angles, we've had to really face the facts of what's going down. And yes, we know that we are by the call of God. But it's been a big change for us. Our world has changed radically. But business-wise, I think we've learned a lot. We will never be the same. And we just met with someone today. So we met with a supplier today. We're realizing our online presence and how we do online. We're gonna invest heavily into that. So even though we've invested in the past, we're increasing our investment into that part of the business. Yeah. So we're realizing the online world now is make or break for any business. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So that's. I don't know if that was too long for you, but just that's what we've gone through. And we're strong, actually. I think this is the first month we've broken even in terms of cash flow. Okay. Our first cash flow break even. Fantastic.
Now, from when we first met, you've also got back into, you're doing some more stuff in leadership in the church again, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
It's a kind of full circle.
Yeah, it is a full circle. It's not the same though. It's different. I see myself as a bridge between marketplace and church.
Yeah.
In thinking actually, and lifestyle. So I think the church also transitions step by step.
Yeah.
And little by little.
Yeah.
A few days ago, the church asked me, would I consider again leading the business guys? And so, yeah, I think I'm trying to this journey. I think one of the things I want to do, Brady, is I'm turning 50 next month. It's much, that's for some that's quite young still, but I'm going 10 years until I'm 60. And it's not a performance thing. I just want to make it count. So I want to take what God's done inside of me and really be intentional.
Yeah, super. So
I see myself as I don't want to go back into full-time ministry, whatever that looks like, because I don't really believe it, because I am in full-time ministry. So it's not about going back to what I was.
Yeah.
It's more about the life of God and who I am.
Yeah.
And how do I integrate into the church in some ways healthily?
Yeah. That's an interesting thing. I've seen some people now at this time saying, okay, do I go back and get a corporate job and so forth? And part of what I see is I say to them, look, you're not the same person who's going back. So as you bridge into different situations, you've already been through that transformation. So you go in as a different person. You go in as a kingdom person. You go in as an integrated person. Wherever you land, whether you land up in a corporate, you're going back into an NGO or something like that, or you're continuing in your own business. I love your asset stewardship, and it would be lovely to see that translated to the national level, because I do see a lot of politicians making whiplash decisions, running up debt, etc., but really degrading the underlying assets of the nation. That is a concern.
Yeah, it is a concern.
Yeah. So your ability to say, okay, what have I got in my hand? What do I need to prune? What do I need to get rid of? What do I need to do more of? What do I need to do less of? Yeah. But it's fantastic that you find the opportunity in things.
Yeah.
And so your Germans, when are they coming back sometime?
I've got a few friends who are from Germany, and they tell me the guys are coming back. I think different people have different perspectives on the coronavirus. Most believe that it is dangerous, but it's not a. I don't think it's a threat for everybody. In terms of the healthy, I think the healthy are fine.
But you are going to be 50 soon, so you got to.
I think I can. I'm not afraid of the virus. I think I can. My lungs are good. My heart's good.
Fantastic. Yeah. And speaking of heart, so your marriage during the lockdown over here, you got to see a lot of your wife, eh?
I did, but we enjoyed that part of it. So we're doing well.
Fantastic. That's great.
I don't know how far this is going to go, but I phoned my lawyer during the lockdown, and she said to me, look here, I don't want you to quote me on this, and I can't put it in black and white, but I think what's happening is unconstitutional. So she said to me, she told me for what reason. So you're not in South Africa, so maybe I want to open up a can of worms here. But what she was saying was that there were some things that probably if they were tested in court they wouldn't stand. So I'm listening to it and I'm going, I love surfing, and one of the things they've done is they've closed the beaches. And I thought to myself, you know what, if my lawyer's saying it's probably, there's some things that they're putting in place aren't constitutional, so just make sure this doesn't get out, right? But I would sneak out in the dark of the morning in my wetsuit, and I would go and and then obviously going to a beach where no one would be impacted, and no one. I would obviously keep my social distancing, but I would sneak a surf down the road, and just keep myself going during this lockdown. So I think there were more surfers arrested than anyone else in South Africa. Like the surfers just could not keep their hands off the beaches. And I was one of those. And it turned out that a lot of the regulation actually hasn't been constitutional. A lot of my surfing friends that did get criminal records, those records got squashed.
Yeah, there we go. So everything's legal again.
Everything's legal again. Just cut that out, okay? Maybe you shouldn't hear that.
I think this is essential information for people out there. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Grant, thank you so much for sharing your story. I love your journey. I love your intentionality and living out the integrated life, and just the fact that how you adjust and you adapt, whether it's your parents telling you you've got till the end of the month, or whether it's a crisis that you're dealing with over here, and just saying, okay, God, what have we got, what are we going to do with this, and how are we going to make it work? So thank you so much for being on the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. And our tagline here is let my business go. Sounds like that could mean all sorts of things to you.
Yeah, it can. I don't know how to fit this into what you're saying, but about 18 months ago, the Lord spoke to me and said, I want you to downscale the business quite radically. And encouraged me to be very debt resilient.
Yeah.
In some ways, it was a counterintuitive decision, but I knew the Lord had spoken to me. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, that's letting go. It's like it's being willing to follow the Lord when something doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Look, I really am a great believer in common sense, and I think you never throw common sense out the window. Even when God speaks, you embrace what He's saying with a good level of common sense. But I think in many ways, the reason why we've survived the storm is because we obeyed the Lord, and in a sense, we followed through with that.
Mm.
I probably give myself an 80% of how I followed it through.
Yeah.
An 80%. If I look back now, the Lord was so kind to me to give me such clear instructions. It wasn't just an impression; it was a clear instruction.
Yeah.
That'll be a form of letting go and actually obeying the Lord.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, probably you would like to have cut back a little bit more looking back, but amazing that God actually warned you or gave you a heads up and didn't tell you why, but you just did it anyway. Fantastic. That's good. That's a good reminder. Yeah.
And I brought out my partner who we didn't see things eye to eye. Just because we're both Christians doesn't mean we can navigate things. So I was able to... you don't want to... You can also cancel. You can cut it out as well. But a great guy. But we didn't have the same vision, and we actually parted ways in a healthy way. We can still speak to each other. We still we can break bread together. We can so it is actually a great victory for us to part ways well, and for me to buy him out, and he was happy with the price. So. And just before the lockdown, so he's very happy, and I'm happy that we part ways. And
happy, yeah, fantastic, excellent. Well, Grant, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Greatly appreciate it, and look forward to having you on again. In the meantime, keep surfing.
Thank you.
Okay.